Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about the obesity epidemic, and we're also going to talk about junk food. To start us off, I'll talk about some of the definitions and statistics, the consequences of obesity, and then I'm going to really break down into junk food, exactly how it works, the history of it, the science to it, because there's actually a lot more that goes on behind the scenes that goes into junk food than we think. And it's kind of what makes it so addicting, but we'll learn about that too. And then, of course, the health effects of junk food, why you can't stop eating junk food. And then I've got some steps that you can take to kind of help with it too. So let's define it and give you some statistics. Body mass index, or BMI for short, it's a screening tool that's used for overweight and obesity. Overweight and obesity are defined as abnormal or excessive fat accumulation that is going to present a health risk. So you'll see on your screen, this is a simple chart that can be used. If you take your height in inches, and then you just kind of move your finger along until you find your weight or corresponding weight in that area. And then you would look up to the top in that column and see if you are in the normal, overweight, obese, or the extreme obesity range. And I will say all through college, BMI was something that my professors never really wanted to use as a telltale sign if someone is overweight or obese. It was more for children than anything. Because if you look at a football player or a wrestler or someone who has a very large build and they are very athletic, they could come up as being obese. But if we actually did a full percent body fat test on them, they would have the normal amount of fat or percent body fat that way. So it's never a number you want to define yourself with, but this is just a simple way that they look at obesity. So weight that is higher than what is considered a healthy weight for a given height, as I was saying, is going to be described as overweight or obesity. And so looking at this was kind of falls back with that chart that I just had up on the screen too as well. Less than 18.5 is going to be underweight. 18.5 to 25 is healthy. 25 to 30 is overweight. And then anything higher than 30 is going to be in that obesity range. And they actually have obesity divided into further categories. So class 1 obesity is 30 to 35. Class 2 is 35 to 40. And then class 3, which is also sometimes categorized as severe obesity, is if you have a BMI of 40 or higher. Oop, went back. So obesity is a very complex health issue, and it results from a combination of many factors and causes, behavior and genetics for one. Behavior can include physical activity or inactivity, your dietary patterns, any kind of medications you're taking, and then other exposures too as well. And then kind of like what we talked about last week, genetics, your food environment, your physical activity environment, your education and skills, the food marketing and promotion commercials that you see, and also the people you just kind of surround yourself with too as well. So looking at obesity statistics, so from 1999 to 2000 through 2017 to 2018, the US obesity prevalence increased from 30.5% to 42.4%. And so during that same time, severe obesity went from 4.7 to 9.2. Another big thing that we like to look at too as well is medical costs, things that are associated with our hospital bills, medications we have to take, different medical costs that are associated with health conditions. And so $147 billion was the estimated annual medical cost for obesity in the United States, and that was in 2008. Medical costs for people who had obesity were $1,400 higher than those with a healthy weight. Almost 1 in 5 children and more than 1 in 3 adults struggle with obesity. Children with obesity are more likely to have obesity as an adult. And adults with obesity have higher risk for developing heart disease and type 2 diabetes. And this was a very startling statistic I found, that if the current trend continues, virtually 100% of Americans are going to be obese by the end of the century. So then this next slide here This just shows you the prevalence of self-reported obesity, and this was in 2019. So one of the things with self-reported obesity is these are those surveys that get sent out to people. So some people are going to lie, some people aren't going to take them, and then some people are just going to be brutally honest when they send in these results. So taking into the account that some people could be lying, we could actually see a lot more of this 35% color, that darker orange color, than we're actually seeing. But what's really startling is that we've got DC and Colorado are the only ones in that green range. Everyone else is going to be in that orange, dark orange. We do have a few yellows, so that's still going to be okay for us. That's not too terrible yet. But again, this was in 2019 and this is self-reported. So this could be a very different map if we had some honest survey takers. So let's go into consequences of obesity. People who have obesity compared to those with a healthy weight are going to be at an increased risk for many serious diseases and health conditions. There is all causes of death or mortality, high blood pressure, low HDL, high LDL, high levels of triglycerides, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, just pain in your body in general, chances of stroke, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, low quality of life, anxiety, depression, mental disorders, sleep apnea, and breathing problems. And then not to mention, we also have prostate enlargement, heart attacks, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So you could never have a drop of alcohol in your life and still have fatty liver disease just because of your lifestyle and the things that you're eating can affect your liver too as well. It's not just from alcohol. So that's why we get that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Reduced female fertilization rates, stress on your joints, GERD, cancer, degradation of your cartilage, and low-grade systemic inflammation. So these are all super serious consequences that come with obesity that, I mean, a lot of people know the consequences that come with obesity, but there are so many more that I think a lot of people don't think about or don't relate to obesity. So these are just more things that we need to think of too as well. So that is obesity. Let's talk about how junk food works. High calorie, low nutrient foods are a major contributing factor to why our diet rates so poorly compared to other countries around the world. And obviously the intake of junk food should be as low as possible, but how exactly does it work? Why is it so good? Why can't we say no? Why can't we stop eating it? All of these questions that we might have. There are few things in this world more delicious than a Snickers bar, some people might say. Notice how your tongue begins to tingle and your mouth fills with saliva while you're still unwrapping it. Then that first bite, that intoxicating tsunami of the sweet, the salty, the rich, and the creamy, those are lighting up all of those pleasure centers in your brain, just like Times Square. And there's only one way to keep that thrill alive, and that's to take another bite. So junk food works because of the taste, because it's cheap, and it's fast, and it's readily available. Defining junk food, it's literally food that has little or no nutritional value, but it still has a crap load of calories. And those calories come from fat, sugar, and salt. And then we know the typical junk foods: candy, salty snack foods, high-fat dairy, packaged sweets, baked goods, sugary soft drinks, and the list goes on. Junk food is what we call empty calories. I'm sure you've heard me say that before. Loading our body with excess energy, which is mostly stored as fat, without having any fiber or vitamins or minerals that our body actually needs to promote healthy development and fight disease. So one of the big things is people always correlate fast food with junk food. So I just kind of wanted to break that down a little bit. You know, what about fast food? Is that also considered junk food? Well, you could argue that a Big Mac has nutritional value because it provides 24 grams of protein. That's pretty good. And it's got some fiber, and it has 25% of your calcium for the day. However, it's 530 calories. It has 48% of your saturated fat for the day. and 40% of your sodium. In one sandwich, a little less than half of your sodium for the day is right there in your hands. If you pair that with a large order of fries and a Coke, you're quickly going to understand why most, if not all, fast food does qualify as junk food. So, who first discovered how much we love these unnatural treats? The history of junk food and fast food is wrapped up into the industrialization of America. Before the early 1800s, food was almost exclusively prepared at home, and it was made with minimally processed ingredients that were grown locally and harvested seasonally. And that's not to say that people ate healthy and varied diets, but the very idea of junk food, that highly processed, commercially manufactured foods, it just didn't exist. Andrew F. Smith is a food historian, and he wrote a book, Fast Food and Junk Food, an encyclopedia of what we love to eat. And he actually credits the industrialization of flour mills in the 1820s with the launch of the junk food era. And this is because all the innovations in the milling technology, transportation, it was able to bring all that inexpensive white flour to so many people. Even today, we know that cheap white flour is the foundation of very low fiber, high carbohydrate buns and cookies and snack cakes. During the American Civil War in the 1860s, the troops grew accustomed to eating from cans and jars of mass-produced rations. And so when they came home, they kind of wanted that same convenience and similar taste. And the industrial factory drew people away from farms and into the city. And so then there were food vendors that were parking their carts outside of the factory gates, offering the first kind of fast foods to all of the hungry workers too as well. And then the Cracker Jack. It's actually been known as the first great American junk food. I thought that was kind of a fun little thing to add in there. That salty sweet blend of popcorn and molasses and peanuts that was introduced by Frederick and Lewis at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. The recipe wasn't a novelty, but the brothers' true genius was the marketing, was that they put a prize in every box, and then their trademark packaging too as well. By 1916, Cracker Jack was the best-selling snack in the world. And then the history of soft drinks, that goes all the way back to the 17th century in Europe, where carbonated water was first mixed with lemon juice and honey to try to make a bubbly sweet concoction. And in America, the first batches of Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola syrup, those were mixed at pharmacy counters in the 1880s and the 1890s, and those were sold as a refreshing, healthy elixir to help with digestion. The emergence of fast food was fueled by the rise of automobile culture and then that suburbanization of American cities in the 1950s. And originally, drive-thrus were just a convenient novelty. It was something new. It was a quick way to get burgers and fries, but it became an American institution rather quickly. The second half of the 20th century witnessed explosive growth in the variety and the affordability of all of the junk and the fast food that's all around. And then, of course, innovations in manufacturing and packaging, transporting and marketing junk food, especially to children, turned these rare treats into a steady diet for millions of people. Also, I hope some of you found some of these pictures kind of funny to see if you missed any of these snacks that we might not see in the stores anymore, because I know Sixlets were my favorite. But anyway, so let's get into the science of it, because as I said earlier, food scientists know what pairs good with what to help balance out the greasy and the salty with like a fizzy soda. So there's a lot more that goes into the science of junk food too as well. Junk food has been carefully engineered by food scientists and snack manufacturers to hit a sweet spot that keeps us wanting more and more and more. It starts in your mouth. One of the distinguishing characteristics of all great junk food is mouth feel. Cheetos are famous or infamous, I guess, depending on who you ask, for delivering explosive cheesy flavor without heavy, greasy mouthfeel of actual cheese. Instead of tasting like the salty fat bombs that they are, Cheetos literally just melt in your mouth, kind of like a vanishing caloric density. Well, your brain relies partially on mouth feel to determine how many calories are in a particular food. But when Cheetos melt into nothingness, it tricks you into eating the whole bag. Fast food cashes in on the same mouthfeel science. A meal of a hamburger and fries is undeniably fatty, and your mouth knows that. But food scientists have discovered that the potentially unpleasant mouthfeel of greasy fries is perfectly balanced out with the astringent quality of a carbonated beverage or a pop. And so that balances out that salty and that sweet. The food industry spends tens of millions of dollars a year researching and developing these ideal combinations of mouthfeel and crunch that keep us coming back for more. And no, if you're wondering, I'm not mispronouncing mouthful. Mouthfeel is the physical sensations in the mouth that are caused by food or drink, as distinct from taste. So another word for it's going to be texture. The brains of modern humans evolved in a place and time when daily life was consumed by the search for more calories. So as omnivores, we can physically digest a wide variety of foods, but not all foods are calorically equal. Meat, for example, delivers many more calories per bite than leaves. So to feed ourselves more efficiently, the brain evolved ways to quickly identify the most calorie-dense foods. And it still does this, even though, food scarcity isn't really an issue for us anymore. When hunger strikes and we stand in the kitchen trying to choose between an apple or chips, there's a region in your brain in the prefrontal cortex that's going to scream at you to take the chips instead, because you could die tomorrow. This could be the last time you have chips. So our brain is still kind of working against us in that way too as well. So the health effects of junk food. Most fast food, including drinks and sides, are loaded with carbohydrates with little to no fiber. When your digestive system breaks down those foods, the carbs are released as glucose or sugar into your bloodstream. As a result, your blood sugar is going to increase. So your pancreas responds to the surge in glucose by releasing insulin. Insulin transports sugar throughout your body to cells that need it for energy. And as your body uses or stores the sugar, your blood sugar is going to return to normal. This blood sugar process is highly regulated by your body. And as long as you're healthy, your organs can properly handle all of those sugar spikes. But if you're frequently eating high amounts of carbs, that's going to lead to repeated spikes in your blood sugar. And over time, those insulin spikes are going to cause your body's normal insulin response to falter. So this increases your risk for insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and weight gain. The overconsumption of junk food has been directly connected to higher rates of obesity and increased risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even depression. A diet that's high in sugar, simple carbohydrates like white flour, potatoes, and like sugary drinks, and saturated fat is one of the chief causes of the obesity epidemic. So that's why we're really hammering in on junk food today. So what's the connection between type 2 diabetes and junk food? Well, Americans on average consume 22 teaspoons of sugar a day. Much of that's going to be in the form of high fructose corn syrup, which is going to be in our pop and our candy bars. When the body breaks down those simple carbs, your blood sugar levels spike, and that's going to force your pancreas to quickly release insulin so that cells can absorb and then store these sugars. Frequent blood sugar spikes eventually wear out the body's insulin-producing cells, and that's what's going to trigger type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes carries a host of health complications, as we know. We've talked about it a few weeks ago, but including heart disease, painful nerve damage, kidney damage, an increased risk of Alzheimer's, and foot infections that can require amputation. So then what about your respiratory system? Well, excess calories from fast food meals can cause weight gain, and this may lead towards obesity. Obesity increases your risk for respiratory problems such as asthma and shortness of breath, because those extra pounds can put pressure on your heart and your lungs, and symptoms may show up even with little exertion, so barely working out. So you're going to notice difficulty breathing when you're walking, climbing stairs, or exercising. And then let's see how it affects our mental health and our central nervous system. So a poor diet in refined sugars, processed meats, and high-fat dairy desserts is going to have an effect on our mental health. Researchers have actually found a strong connection between a junk food diet and higher rates of depression. High fat and sugar levels are known to increase inflammation and oxidative stress in your brain, and that can disrupt your brain's chemical signaling. And then there's also junk food addiction. There is a growing body of research that I found that shows that obese adults and children exhibit classic signs of addiction. So like out of control binge eating, increased tolerance, and withdrawal symptoms. And these are usually associated with alcohol and drugs. So that was very alarming. Fast food can also satisfy hunger in the short term, but long-term results are going to be less positive. People who eat fast food and processed pastries are 51% more likely to develop depression than people who don't eat foods or eat very few of them like that. The foods you eat can also impact your skin's appearance. So that's the integumentary system, your skin, hair, and your nails. But it might not actually be the food that you suspect. In the past, and I'm sure as soon as I said that, you're probably like, oh yeah, chocolate and greasy foods to be blamed for, acne breakouts. But according to the Mayo Clinic, it's actually just carbohydrates in general. Carb-rich foods lead to blood sugar spikes, and those sudden jumps in blood sugar levels can trigger acne. Carbs and sugar in fast food and processed food can also increase acids in your mouth. So this is how it's going to affect our skeletal system. Those acids can break down tooth enamel. As tooth enamel disappears, bacteria can take hold, and that's how we get cavities. Obesity can also lead to complications with your bone density and your muscle mass. So that's why it's super important to keep exercising to help build muscles, which is going to support your bones, and of course, maintaining a healthy diet to minimize bone loss. So from head to toe, there are a lot of effects from junk food. I'm not going to read through this whole slide in its entirety, but headaches, depression, acne, dental distress, shortness of breath, heart disease or stroke, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, weight gain, extra calories, blood sugar spike, insulin resistance, and bloating and puffiness. So why can't you stop eating junk food? Cravings for junk food are a very common reason that people fall off the wagon with their healthy eating plans. They can lead to unhealthy eating habits and be the biggest obstacle to weight loss. Have you ever found yourself craving a second helping of dessert after an already really filling dinner? Or finishing a sharing size bag of chips or chocolate, but you had it alone, you didn't share it with anybody? Well, just know you're not alone, because it's incredibly hard with some foods to know when to say stop. Just like as I talked about the Cheetos earlier, our brain can't tell when we're full when foods like that just kind of dissolve. So what is it that makes certain foods seemingly irresistible? What keeps us coming back for more even when we know we're full? What makes us binge on foods that we know are bad for us? Is it willpower? We often beat ourselves up for giving into our junk food cravings, but it's no accident that these foods are so hard to resist. The food industry engineers foods to taste the best they possibly can with the goal of overriding our internal stop signals and encouraging us to buy more. As we talked about earlier in the science, it's because there are addictive flavor combinations that have been created for all different types of foods and snacks. Resisting junk food cravings is not a case of willpower. Junk foods are specifically engineered to target our pleasure receptors in the brain. So what about bliss point? What's going on when we consume these foods that are engineered like this? Our bodies respond to foods that hit the bliss points by triggering reward pathways in our brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, so basically a chemical messenger in your brain, and that's involved with feelings of euphoria and bliss and motivation and pleasure, for example. The result of this is a feeling of pleasure that acts like a high, and we keep on coming back for more. And this leads to a perpetual cycle of cravings, eating more junk, weight gain, and then of course more cravings. Our brain is also extremely smart, and so it remembers what actions we did that make us feel good, such as eating chocolate. So then when we feel bad for whatever reason, our brain says, hey, eating chocolate might help, and then we're driven to go eat chocolate. After we repeat this process enough, it becomes kind of an automatic habit. Of course, food brings pleasure in many other ways, for example, by producing feelings of nostalgia, like when I brought up those pictures of old snacks and foods, or enjoying food socially with family and friends. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this, but there is a difference between enjoying foods and building unhealthy habits by overeating foods that hit our bliss point. And you might be surprised about which foods are the culprits. Some of the obvious bliss point items are going to be cakes, biscuits, donuts, ice cream, chips, muffins, coffee, or chocolate and sweets. However, it's more than just obvious foods. Next time you pick up a jar of tomato sauce at the store, I want you to look at the ingredients and see just how much sugar and salt are hidden inside. That's another main building point of bliss point foods: salt and sugar and fat. And we're going to find that in sauces, in our dressings, in our dips, and soups, and bread, and cereal, and bars. And the list could go on and on. That's going to be that longed for trio. That's what keeps us coming back for more. So what can we do? Because while succumbing to cravings may seem inevitable in the moment, there are a few simple things that you can do. And so I've got some ideas to help get you started. So there's no better way to handle cravings than to plan ahead. If you have healthy meals and snacks packed and ready for you at lunchtime and in the afternoon, you're far less likely to grab a leftover piece of whatever, or stop through the drive-thru on your way home, or eat some sweets that someone brought into the office. So in other words, you can reduce your food cue reactivity. So this is what researchers call your susceptibility to being influenced by the way food smells, or commercials, or conversations you're having with people that are surrounding you every day. So try to plan out each week's meals on a Sunday, or maybe the day before your work week starts. Maybe you have Mondays off, so you can start planning on Mondays. Go grocery shopping with a grocery list. Don't just walk into the store with nothing. And then you can prepare large batches of easy foods like brown rice and beans, stir-fried or roasted vegetables, or even like cold salads, using food storage containers like mason jars or foil to help you pack up those serving sizes. So that way you can just reach it in the morning, grab it, put it in your lunchbox, and head out the door for work. Fruits like apples, bananas, and oranges, things that travel really well that you can keep on your desk too as well. That makes it an easy afternoon snack. And while you're at the grocery store with that grocery list and your plan, the perimeter of the grocery store typically is going to have all the produce, the dairy, the meat, things like that, where you're going to find those real foods rather than highly processed food products. So when you go shopping, try to purchase items only from those sections. And also just a thing, if a food item has more than a few ingredients on the labels, and a lot of them are things you can't pronounce, just don't buy it. Try to kind of transition your diet to more whole foods. Easier said than done, I know, but it's a step you can take. And then one of the most common nutrition myths is that fat makes you fat. But in fact, your body does need fat. However, there are many different types of fat. We want to try to avoid trans fat and limit saturated fats, but they're not scary. Just try to limit. And we want to focus more on heart-healthy fats like nuts and avocado that help us feel full and reduce our cravings. So having a handful of mixed nuts as an afternoon snack, or you can make a homemade salad dressing yourself using olive oil and vinegar and then some seasonings and spices. Adding fresh guacamole or a fatty fish like salmon to your day is another way we can get in those healthy filling fats. And protein, we got to make sure we're getting enough protein because that's going to help us feel full, often more than a lot of macronutrients like carbohydrates will. So filling your diet with healthy sources of protein like fish, beans, vegetables, and nuts, because when you're full, there's less room and less desire, of course, for junk food. And then fruit. Yes, fruit has sugar, but it has a lot of vitamins and antioxidants and water too. And it also contains fiber, which, as we've talked about a lot this series, it slows and balances out the effects on your blood sugar. And it also helps us keep us feeling full too as well. And once you try to wean yourself off of foods that have a bunch of manufactured sugar, when you start eating just more fruit as like your base of where you're getting your sugar from, fruit is actually going to start to taste a lot sweeter and more satisfying to you. So grab a bowl of berries or a slice of watermelon, apple, something like that when you're craving something sweet. And then also try adding in some new and different foods to your routine. The more varied your diet, the less likely you will get bored or crave junk food. So for example, adding a new green to your salad, trying a new type of fish, and then a bonus is eating diverse foods of many colors is going to boost your overall health and helps with disease prevention too. Purple potatoes, red beets, orange carrots, green kale, just getting a bunch of color on your plate. And then this was just kind of a fun little fact that I thought was interesting to share. There was a study back in 2013 that showed when people were trained to look at and interpret one of their most craved junk foods in a negative light, the desire for it lessened. So they were asked to view this craved food as if they were already feeling full, or view it as if they just saw someone sneezing on it, or that they could save it for later so it really wasn't that big of a deal, or they were told about the negative consequences of eating it. You could get a stomach ache, for example. So your mind is a really powerful tool, and it can't hurt just to experiment, to kind of talk to yourself that way about food. Just, look at something and be like, oh, I just saw someone sneeze on that, and then walk away. And also kind of on the other side of that, there was also a study that showed that focusing on the positive side of healthy eating is more effective than focusing on the need to remove junk. So if you're someone who is constantly belittling yourself for eating junk food, try to look at healthy eating more positively than telling yourself you have to remove junk, because then you're just going to be craving it, and then you're not going to feel that craving until you eat it, and then you're going to lead to overeating, and then it's just that vicious cycle. And the more healthy foods you add in, the easier it's going to be to crowd out the unhealthy ones. So try to stay positive. And then lastly, there's almost always, an emotional component behind cravings. Sure, you really need that brownie because you like the flavor, or your blood sugar is low and you need an energy boost. You're more likely to grab the Cheetos or leftover cookies when you're feeling upset or you're stressed about something. Consider how you may be eating or drinking as a way to stuff feelings, or to distract yourself, or to procrastinate. Try to be compassionate to yourself and do some gentle exploration. So try to redirect yourself when you feel the urge to reach for food, instead of doing what needs to be done or saying what needs to be said. So some healthy stress management tools are going to be taking a walk or a run, yoga, meditating for a few minutes, taking some deep breaths, talking to a trusted friend or family member. Do something fun and creative like painting or coloring, or even journaling too as well. So experiment and find what works best for you. And if your stress feels overwhelming, then talk to your doctor or a mental health professional too as well. There's nothing wrong with getting that emotional support. And they can even offer other effective and healthy non-food coping mechanisms, because sometimes it's a lot more than what we can handle. And there is no shame in seeking out finding help, even if it's something as simple as, I can't stop eating junk food or overeating. It's a lot more in your brain than you think. So seeking out mental professional help is always a really good idea if that sounds like you. And lastly, sleep. Most people don't get nearly enough sleep. And while you're probably aware of the effects on your mood or your energy level, you may not know that lack of sleep is actually thought to play a big role in junk food cravings too. There was a study I found that showed that sleep restriction resulted in more hunger and less ability to control the intake of snacks. So make the effort to turn in a little bit earlier every night. You might also want to stop eating a few hours before you intend to go to bed. Just in case, if you're someone that struggles with digestion, a full stomach can cause indigestion, and it can interfere with your ability to fall or stay asleep, especially if you eat really close to bed and then you're trying to put your body into like that lay down relaxation mode. Your body's still busy trying to digest all that food. So those were just a few tips of things that I would suggest that you can try to do. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And next week, we are going to talk about diet trends. I picked 3 really popular ones. And so I'm going to break those down for you, talk to you about those, the benefits, the side effects, and kind of a little overview and history of them. So make sure you tune in so you can see what those diet trends are going to be.